San Francisco Bay is an isolated island in the middle of the San Francisco Bay. Also known as Drac, meaning rock, it was taken from the Spanish by the Americans in 1848, with its primary purpose being to defend San Francisco. After the civil wars that followed, some rebels were sent here and imprisoned. However, the island's peak as a prison came about a century later, in the 1930s, with the fortification of its highest point and the addition of new buildings. Of course, one of the main factors contributing to the island's popularity was the prisoners held there, some of whom included Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly. Alcatraz's reputation for hospitality grew in those years. Surrounded by the cold and turbulent waters of the Pacific, it was one of the world's highest security prisons. Despite this, there were few escape attempts from the 1930s to the 1960s. However, almost all those who attempted to escape were caught, and even those who managed to evade capture perished in the cold waters of this bay, either freezing or drowning. 60. Shortly after, the three men I will mention will destroy all these past experiences and carry out one of the most popular escape attempts ever discussed in the world. First, let me introduce the characters of our story. Frank Morris, known to have a very high IQ, even said to be in the top 2% of the world in terms of IQ. Our main character, Frank Morris, had been convicted of crimes such as bank robbery and had attempted to escape from various prisons multiple times. In January 1960, he ended up at Alcatraz. Frank was abandoned by his family at the age of 11 and entered prison at the age of 13 for crimes he committed. In addition to being an experienced thief, he had been in and out of reformatory and prison numerous times for armed robbery and illegal drug trafficking. Frank was serving a 10-year sentence for bank robbery at Alcatraz, his final stop. Frank's teammates, John and Clarence Anglin, came from a family of farm workers. They had committed their first crimes at the age of 14, and over the years they had begun robbing banks. They were caught trying to rob a bank in Columbia, Alabama. They were caught attempting to rob a bank in Colombia, and after receiving 35-year sentences, they were transferred from Atlanta prison to Alcatraz. The last member of the group, Alan West, was a New York thief who had been arrested more than 20 times before his adventure began at Atlanta Penitentiary. Far from reforming, he was caught stealing a car and sent to Atlanta Penitentiary, but like the others, he tried to escape from several prisons. His final destination was also Alcatraz in 1957. They worked so systematically that they played an accordion they found during the prison's daily music hour, creating even more noise in an already noisy environment, and took turns speeding up the process of enlarging the ventilation holes using handmade drills. When the work was done, they somehow concealed the hole in the wall and behaved as if nothing had happened until the next work session. Over time, when the hole in the wall grew large enough to pass through, the team reached the unused corridor behind the cell walls where the pipes passed. In these corridors, the pipes passed through the cell block's topmost empty spaces. When the hole in the cell became large enough to pass through, the team reached the abandoned corridor behind the cell walls where the pipes ran. In these corridors, they climbed the pipes to the empty floor at the top of the cell block and created a workspace they could call a workshop. In this workshop, they would begin to build the handmade inflatable boats they would use for their escape. Contrary to what we see in movies, all of Alcatraz's inmates were fully aware of this escape plan, and such an environment had developed that other prisoners began assisting them with material supplies to see what would happen and whether the team could escape. The team had made a statue-like mannequin of themselves using toilet paper, soap, toothpaste, and dust from the debris to avoid suspicion that they weren't in their beds while working in the workshops above and preparing escape equipment. That is, only the head part existed. They even obtained hair for the mannequins from the prison barber, another inmate, achieving a very realistic appearance. This allowed them to continue their work comfortably at night. The help they received from other prisoners was not limited to the hair provided by the barber. They also found more than 50 raincoats, which they used to make a boat and life jackets. To do this, they used a popular issue of Mechanic magazine found in the prison, which focused on survival in nature, and they also made other equipment using the tactics they saw there. They also found information in another magazine they discovered about navigating at sea and the dangers of sailing, which was invaluable to them given their dire circumstances and the fact that they found this information in the 1960s. They carefully sewed together the boots and life jackets they made from raincoats, melted the silicone they found from the prisoners using the heat from the hot water pipes in the corridor behind the cell, and glued them together to make a primitive inflatable boat measuring approximately 1.80 by 4. The team, who also made their oars from scrap wood they found, were now ready to set off. Finally, they climbed from the workshop to the roof through the ventilation chimney and unscrewed the bolts of a propeller large enough for them to pass through, completing all the preparations. Of course, this preparation process, which I have described to you so easily, took 6 months and involved overcoming many obstacles. But in the end, everything was ready and it was time to go. On the night of June 11, 1962, the team set out to execute the final phase of the plan. They placed the mannequin heads they had made from improvised materials on their beds and positioned the pillows on the lower part of the blanket to give the mannequin a fully human appearance. They then passed through the hole they had opened in the ventilation duct into the rear corridor. However, one of the members had a major problem. Allen had noticed a few days earlier that the hole he had opened in the air duct was too large and obvious. He had shaped it a bit more with cement to make it invisible. However, on the night of the escape, when he lifted the grate in front of the hole, he was shocked to find that the cement had dried over the past few days, eliminating the width Allen needed to pass through. The others had already left, and Allen couldn't wait for him. While the others climbed from the corridor to the roof fan, Allen tried to widen the hole to get through without being caught, but he couldn't do it. The other members of the team had already removed the fan screws and climbed onto the roof. Allen realized that his escape was now a fantasy because of his own mistake and returned to his bed to lie down. At this point, the team climbed onto the roof with their tools and boots, grabbed onto a kitchen pipe, and slid down 15 meters. They then managed to pass through the 7-meter barbed wire fence without puncturing their boats and reached the northeast coastline of the island, which was the blind spot of the prison towers and projectors. They managed to pass through the fence without puncturing their boats, reaching the northeastern coastline of the island and arriving at this area, which was a blind spot for the prison towers and projectors. They used the accordion, which they had previously used to muffle sound, to inflate the boat using its spring force. The plan was working exactly as intended, but the prisoners knew that the real problem was not scaling the walls and fences, but surviving the cold waters of the Pacific. Fortunately, they managed to inflate their boat and, according to the inspector's estimates, set sail for Angel Island around 10 p.m. Frank, John, and Clarence managed to escape from the notorious Alcatraz prison, where no one was thought to be able to escape, using their primitive boat and flawless plan. All that remained was to survive in the cold waters and never be caught. After that day, at least officially, they were never seen again. All that remained was to survive in the cool waters and never be caught. After that day, they were never seen again, at least not officially. Thanks to the successful mannequins they had made, the team's absence went unnoticed until morning. When morning came, the guard, hearing no response from the mannequins, or rather, what he thought were prisoners, assumed the trio was still in their beds until he struck one on the head, knocking it back and breaking it. But when he realized that wasn't the case, alarms immediately sounded, and extensive searches were launched. For 10 days, comprehensive searches were conducted in the air, at sea, and on land. Searches conducted in the air, sea, and on land over 10 days failed to find any trace of the trio. They had escaped. 3 days later, on June 14th, Coast Guard teams found a paddle floating about 180 meters off the southern coast of Angel Island. On the same day, a local fisherman found a wallet wrapped in a bag containing the names, addresses, and photos of the Angel brothers, relatives, and friends. In the days that followed, pieces of rain gear believed to belong to the team's boat were found near the Golden Gate Bridge. And finally, during those same days in June, a deflated, handmade life jacket was found about 45 to 50 meters off the coast of Alcatraz, which were the only items related to the men that had been found up to that point. However, unlike him, no body or other concrete evidence was ever found. So much so that despite finding no proof that the men had died, both the FBI and Alcatraz management issued a statement claiming the team had drowned, both to protect their image and because they believed escaping in an inflatable boat across the cold Pacific waters was impossible. But this was not a convincing explanation, as the famous Alcatraz prison would be closed a year after this escape due to high costs. Allen, who failed to escape due to his own mistake, signed an informant agreement with the FBI to reveal the entire plan in exchange for not having his sentence increased. Beyond the part of the plan I have described to you, the team's ongoing objective was to steal a car after reaching land and continue their escape. Shortly after the incident, a report came in about a stolen vehicle on Angel Island. However, that car was never found, and the FBI never added this report to the file. Although the agency insisted that the prisoners were dead in response to questions directed at the FBI, various members of the Angel family received anonymous postcards that very year in 1962. The following Christmas, their mother found a postcard in the mailbox addressed to our mother from John and Clarence wishing her a Merry Christmas, which clarified everything. Over the years, family members continued to receive postcards, sometimes signed and sometimes unsigned. Of course, since Frank's family, so what happened to him remained a complete mystery, or so it was believed until 2013. But, as I said, Angel's mother received anonymous flowers and cards every Christmas until she died in 1973 and Mother's Day. In fact, when the mother died in 1973, according to the family members, two women who were excessively tall and long, wearing heavy makeup that no one recognized, attended the funeral, waited for a while, and then left. Years after this incident, in 1989, when the father of the family died, two people with beards and glasses, whom no one recognized, attended the funeral. They waited in front of the funeral for 5 minutes, cried, and then left. Even though strong evidence emerged that these men were not dead, the FBI never backed down from its statement. It was unable to find these three men or any evidence about them. There were only the postcards and the mysterious two people who attended the funerals. This mysterious case was closed by the FBI in 1979 and handed over to the police department. Although the prisoners were declared dead, the search continued for years. Robert, the Angel brother who was not in prison, confessed on his deathbed in 2010 that he had been in contact with his fugitive brothers from approximately 1963 to the 1990s. In 2018, another interesting fact emerged in the escapees case. The FBI confirmed that in 2013, the San Francisco Police Department received a letter written by John Anglin. The letter stated, "My name is John Anglin. In June 1962, with my brothers Clarence and Frank Morris. Believe it or not, we escaped from Alcatraz. It was very difficult, but we succeeded. Frank from our group died in Alexandria, Egypt, in 2008 and was buried under another name. My brother Clarence passed away from cancer 3 years ago. I am 83 years old, and like my brother, I have cancer. My condition is poor. If you cover my treatment costs, I want to come and turn myself in and tell everything. It said on TV that you would cover my treatment. That was enough." However, although the FBI confirmed the receipt of this letter 5 years after the incident came to light in 2018, they never made such a statement on television or issued a call for information. So, this was the story of the three legendary men who managed to escape from Alcatraz prison, which now serves as a museum. What did the prisoners do after their escape? That is truly a matter of curiosity, but that's all I have for this week. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please remember that I do all the work on this channel by myself and can only continue with your likes and comments. See you next time. As always, take care until the next video.